Welcome to the Big Sky. I'm Anthony Crescenzo. 4, 5, and 6, that's the national ranking for Weber State, Eastern Washington, and UC Davis. The Big Sky is really making the rest of the country take notice, and rightfully so. The three teams have 2 losses between them against FCS teams. And one of those losses was Weber State beating Eastern Washington. It's kind of ridiculous. Let's look directly inside the conference. The undefeated Aggies have already surpassed their 5 wins, which is their total wins for last season. And head coach Dan Hawkins is only in his 2nd season with the team. The Wildcats, who are at the number 4 position in the nation, are number 1 in FCS in turnovers gained with 22 in total. The defense has collected 11 interceptions and 11 fumbles. I don't think any quarterback wants to face them in the playoffs. And Northern Arizona is right behind them with 20 turnovers gained, 14 of those on interceptions. Could you imagine if Montana's Dante Olson were on either one of those defenses? He's still the tackle king of college football. Cal Poly's Joe Prothro is still leading all rushers with 213 carries. Eastern Washington's Roldan Alcabendez is still perfect on field goals. Weber State's Rashid Shaheed is leading all kick returners, averaging 40 yards per return. This week you can catch Idaho in Cheney, Washington, and look for Gage Gruber to try to put a lot of points up early after Eastern's bye week following the loss to Weber. That's going to be your Root Sports Game of the Week. The Wildcats will fly to North Dakota, UC Davis at Montana, and the Grizz need Dante Olson to be a thorn in Jake Meyer's side all day. Montana State at Idaho State, Cal Poly at NAU. NAU will be looking to shut down Joe Prothro and force Khalil Jenkins to make a mistake. Portland State goes to Sac State, Northern Colorado at SUU. All of these games, except for the one in the Inferno, will be available on Pluto TV. If I missed anything, let us know. For the Conference Whiparound, I'm Anthony Crescenzo.
An exciting Week 8 saw 2 teams pick up their first conference win, but the team making the biggest splash was a team that wasn't even playing. Before we get into Week 9's action, let's look back at the weekend that was. The Monmouth Hawks downed the Camel Fighting Camels 38-21 in both teams' first conference game of the year. The win for Monmouth was their 9th straight victory at home. The Hawks held just a 3-point lead at the break thanks to a big first half from Daniel Smith, who tossed a 58-yard TD pass to Caleb Sneed and added a 12-yard run. Monmouth pulled away in the second half by outscoring Campbell 21-7 thanks to a trio of touchdown runs. Freshman running back Juwan Fari had a monster afternoon, rushing his way to 239 yards on 22 carries and 2 scores, en route to earning Stats FCS Freshman of the Week. Reggie White Jr. caught 5 passes for 45 yards and a score, and on the other side, both Daniel Smith and Jason Demild threw for touchdown passes. The big game for Campbell came from Caleb Sneed, who reeled in 10 passes for 188 yards and 2 scores in the loss. Charleston Southern blew out Presbyterian in their conference opener, 41-7. John Walker found Deshaun Davis for an 8-yard score just over 6 minutes into the game, and the Blue Hose held a 7-0 lead after 1. But once the second quarter started, so did the Buccaneer offense, as they scored the game's next 41 points. Charleston Southern scored twice on defense. First, a 24-yard pick six from Jonathan Slayton in the second, and then in the third, Garris Schwarting picked up a fumble and took it 20 yards to the house. Tyler Teckett connected on a pair of field goals, while quarterback London Johnson accounted for a pair of touchdowns. Johnson finished 6 for 9 for 104 yards and a score through the air, and on the ground he ran for 67 yards on 18 carries and a score. Taz Lindsay caught 5 passes for 64 yards and a touchdown, and for Presbyterian, Walker completed 12 of his 19 passes, and Jarris Jeter ran for 66 yards on 14 carries in the loss. Before we get into this week's action, let's take a look at the updated Big South standings. Kennesaw State sits atop the leaderboard at 2-0 in the conference and 6-1 overall. And despite being off last week, the Owls moved up to number 2 in the most recent Stats FCS Top 25 poll. Monmouth and Charleston Southern, both in second, both at 1-0. Campbell and Garner Webb are both 0-1, and Presbyterian is in the cellar at 0-2. Monmouth looks for their 4th straight win as they travel to take on Presbyterian. The Blue Hose have lost their last 3 and have yet to defeat an FCS opponent this season. Monmouth is one of the most balanced teams in the country, averaging over 456 yards per contest. That's the 20th best mark. They have the 40th best air attack and the 26th best ground game. The Hawks also own the Big South's leader in passing yards, rushing yards, and receiving yards. The Blue Hose have a bottom 10 offense, but their defense ranks in the top 30, which includes the nation's 2nd best air stopping attack. If Presbyterian has a shot, they're going to have to score much more than their 13.5 points they've been averaging through the first 6 games of the season. Campbell is looking to pick up their first Big South win since joining the conference, and they'll be at home hosting 1-6 Gardner-Webb. The Runnin' Bulldogs are one of the worst teams in the FCS, as they have both a bottom 10 offense and defense. On the bright side, their passing defense is the 19th best in the country. As for the Fighting Camels, their passing defense ranks 6th in the FCS, and they're giving up just 20 points per game, the 18th fewest allowed in the nation. At home, Campbell is outscoring opponents 191-94. So look for this weekend to be the one where they earn their first Big South win. The Kennesaw State Owls take their number 2 ranking and 7-game conference winning streak on the road to Charleston Southern to take on the Buccaneers in a battle of top 10 defenses. For Kennesaw State, they're allowing the 5th fewest points per game at just 12.4 and the 5th fewest yards per game at 264.1. Offensively, the Owls are scoring the 2nd most points per game at 48.1, and they have the 2nd best rushing attack in the country. For Charleston Southern, they have the best rushing defense in the FCS, but offensively, they're not as talented as Kennesaw as they rank near the bottom in yards per game. If Charleston Southern's offense can stay hot, they could give Kennesaw State a run. Otherwise, the Owls may be well on their way to their 8th straight conference win. That's all for this week in the Big South. Come back next week for all the results and more. For the FCS Conference Whiparound, I'm Frank LaSala.
With the second half of the college football season now underway, things are starting to tighten up in the MEAC. NC Central earned a very important road victory over Norfolk State 36-6. A&T got back on track, defeating Bethune-Cookman in Florida 35-10. In other action, the Howard Bison earned a hard-fought win over Morgan State 35-26 with 15 unanswered points in the 4th quarter, while quarterback Tyrese Nick led his South Carolina State Bulldogs in both passing and rushing in their victory over Delaware State 30-19. The Standys are now coming into focus in the MEAC, with Florida A&M still in control of their own destiny at 4-0 after a bye week last week. The A&T Aggies and Howard Bison sit at 3-1 close behind, while North Carolina Central sits at 2-1 in conference play. Coming up in Week 9, there are 4 in-conference matchups on offer for the MEAC. Top dog Florida A&M will host Morgan State. North Carolina Central will travel north to face the Delaware State Hornets. Howard will host South Carolina State, while the Norfolk State Spartans head down to Georgia to face Savannah State. But this week's top contest will feature a late-season FCS versus FBS matchup, as Bethune-Cookman will look to pull a massive upset over the University of Nebraska of the Big Ten, who are just 1-6 on the season. For the FCS Conference Whiparound, I'm David Hasshagen.
We had some strong performances this week in the NEC. Bryant eked out a 42-41 victory against Fordham on a last-second field goal. Hines had 256 yards from scrimmage and 2 touchdowns as Duquesne beat St. Francis 27-20. Robert Morris had 539 yards of total offense, its most since 2001, as the Colonials beat Central State 49-45. The Pioneers rallied to beat the Blue Devils 28-25, ending Central Connecticut State's win streak of 8 straight league games. Sacred Heart came back from a 17-7 deficit. I can't say enough about the performance of Sacred Heart's offense. Kevin Duke threw for 374 yards and 3 scores, and also ran one in. Jordan Meacham ran for 107 yards, and Andrew O'Neal had 170 yards receiving and 2 TDs, not to mention that sick one-handed catch. The Pioneers' offense was firing on all cylinders. I'm excited to see if this can continue. And now for a look at the standings. Sacred Heart sits atop the division with a 2-0 record. Central Connecticut State, Bryant, and Duquesne are all 2-1 in the NEC. Wagner is 1-1. St. Francis is 0-2 with Robert Morris at the bottom with an 0-3 record in conference play. There's plenty of NEC action to look forward to this week. Rested Wagner travels to Central Connecticut State to take on the Blue Devils. Jean-Guillaume has put together 3 straight great performances. Even in their loss to the Pioneers, he rushed for 142 yards and a score. Will the Seahawks be able to contain him? But don't count out Wagner either. They boast rushing leader Ryan Fultz. Will the Blue Devils be able to control him? Sacred Heart hosts Bryant this week. Will the Pioneers offense be able to build on their stellar game against the Blue Devils? The Bulldogs have given up a good amount of points to their opponents this year. Fortunately, their offense was able to bail them out. Even in last week's win, they needed to score 9 points in the final 1 minute and 50 seconds of the game. St. Francis travels to Robert Morris. Both teams are looking for their first wins in the conference. St. Francis had a solid performance from Fenimore and Holder last week, but couldn't find an answer for Hines. Opponents have been able to run the ball against the Colonials. Let's see if the Red Flash can capitalize on that and get their run game going. After 2 straight wins, Duquesne has the week off. Well, that's all for me. This is Scott Glennon with your FCS Whiparound.
They say all good things must come to an end at some point, and after 36 games, the longest winning streak in Ohio Valley Conference history was ended this past Saturday in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. It was back on November 23, 2013, that Jacksonville State began this win streak by beating Southeast Missouri 42-34. Fittingly, it was SEMO who ended the streak as well, beating the Gamecocks 37-14. The game turned on one big play from Southeast Missouri's special teams. Tied at 7, Jacksonville State lined up for a field goal, but the Redhawks blocked it, then by Darius Knighton picked it up and ran 85 yards the other way to give the home team a 14-7 lead they would never give back. Now, it takes a total team effort to pull off a win like Southeast Missouri did, and every part contributed. Linebacker Justin Swift had 11 tackles, including 7 solo, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and an interception to earn himself my OVC Defensive Player of the Week award. Also coming up big for SEMO was the punter, Jake Reynolds, who, in 7 punts, had an average of 45.5 yards with a long of 71 and pinned the Gamecocks inside their own 20 on 3 different occasions. That's enough to earn him my OVC Special Teams Player of the Week award. Now, in the first overtime game in the OVC this year, Eastern Illinois outlasted UT Martin 24-21. Murray State moved to the top of the conference and set up a big home date with JSU on Saturday with a 34-6 pounding at Eastern Kentucky. And Tennessee State won at home over Tennessee Tech 41-14, thanks in large part to my OVC Offensive Player of the Week, Michael Hughes, who was 22 of 27 throwing the ball for 318 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, looking at the standings, for the first time in a while, Murray State stands alone at the top at 4-0. As we mentioned before, they'll host an angry Jacksonville State this week. Sitting just behind those two is Southeast Missouri, who will travel to UT Martin on Saturday. They're followed by Tennessee State and Eastern Kentucky, who are both 2-2. Now, EKU hosts Eastern Illinois this week. The Panthers, along with Austin Peay and UT Martin, all have 3 conference losses. And Tennessee Tech is at the bottom and will visit Austin Peay this week, hoping for their first win of 2018. For Football Gameplan's FCS Conference Whiparound, I'm Luke Jackson.
This past Saturday brought us 3 close games in the Patriot League, all coming down to a handful of points. Georgetown defeated visiting Lehigh 22-16 in double overtime as sophomore running back Jackson Saffold ran in for a touchdown to secure the victory. Georgetown had not defeated Lehigh since joining the Patriot League in 2001, continuing their perfect record in conference with their 3rd victory. The Bryant Bulldogs went into Jack Coffey Field at Fordham and outlasted the Rams 42-41. True freshman quarterback Tim DeMoret threw for 4 touchdowns, and sophomore place kicker Andrew Mevis went 2 for 2 on field goal attempts and 5 for 5 on extra points. Yet it was not enough, as Bryant place kicker Luke Samperi nailed his only attempt of the day from 42 yards out to win the game as time expired. The loss drops Fordham to 1-1 in conference play. And Lafayette went into Bucknell in a conference matchup and stole a victory. Bucknell sophomore quarterback Logan Bidekofer completed a 40-yard touchdown pass to Justin Bethea with less than 5 minutes remaining in the game, but was unable to complete the 2-point play afterwards that would tie up the game. Lafayette would hold on for the victory 29-27, securing their first victory in conference. Next Saturday, we'll have 3 conference matchups as Lafayette travels to Fordham and Lehigh travels to Holy Cross. The matchup of the year in the Patriot League may be Georgetown at Colgate. Both teams are undefeated in conference play, with Colgate currently ranked 16th in the nation in FCS rankings. The winner of this matchup will likely win the automatic bid to qualify for playoffs. For the FCS Conference Whiparound, I'm Joel Smuss.
We had another interesting week in the Pioneer League. We saw San Diego roll over Butler and extend their conference winning streak to 25 games. We saw Drake's defense smother Dayton's high-powered offense and lead them to victory. Davidson rushed for 400 yards but fell short to Marist, who had quarterback Austin Day throw for 440 yards and 5 touchdowns. We saw quarterback Lawson Page lead Morehead State to victory over Valparaiso. And finally, Stetson scored a late touchdown and kicked a field goal as time expired to hold off the upset bid from Jacksonville and win 38-35. Now looking to the standings, San Diego is still on top at 4-0. Stetson, Drake, and Marist are all 3-1. Then Morehead State at 2-2, followed by Dayton and Davidson at 2-3. Valparaiso and Butler are both 1-3, and Jacksonville remains winless in conference play. A look into this week's games, Dayton's offense looks to regain their success when they take on Butler. Stetson tries to get a push up the standings in this week's game of the week when they play Davidson. Morehead State hosts Marist, Drake visits Valparaiso, and first place San Diego goes up against last place Jacksonville. For the FCS Whiparound, I'm Dylan Cieslik.
Week 8 in the SWAC featured 4 conference matchups. Alcorn State defeated Grambling 33-26. North Alabama beat Jackson State 24-7. Mississippi Valley State picked up their first victory of the season, edging out Arkansas Pine Bluff 48-47 in double overtime. And Southern U beat Texas Southern 21-7. Taking a look at the standings, Alcorn State has a 2-game lead in the East over Jackson State and Alabama State. In the West, Southern has a 1-game lead over Prairie View A&M and Grambling. Week 9 in the SWAC has 5 conference games on the slate. Arkansas Pine Bluff goes on the road to play Grambling. Prairie View A&M hosts Alcorn State. Mississippi Valley State looks to build momentum after winning their first game of the year as they play Texas Southern on the road. Alabama A&M takes on Alabama State, and Jackson State plays Southern U. For the FCS Conference Whiparound, I'm Max Bazzone.